Okay, so I'll begin with the simplest part of this halacha, which is that fruits that grow on a tree receive the blessing of ha'etz, except when they don't, or they don't grow on a tree. And what's the definition of a tree? That's really the challenging aspect of determining whether a fruit is ha'etz or not. So in this chapter, when we're discussing, in other chapters, the complexity is more found in the laws, like last week's subject of mezanis bread and how much you need to eat to be considered a meal. It's a clear halachic discussion. There's not much, you also have to know a little bit of realistically how much you're consuming, but it's more a halachic complexity. Regarding fruits and vegetables and determining blessings, the halachas are not that complex. What's complex is that most people don't have knowledge of agriculture. Mm-hmm. They don't have knowledge of knowing how things grow. And this is what can enter confusion of a blessing of a certain food. For example, I had a friend for years until I mentioned it to him, who would say hadam on a certain fruit, who would say ha'etz on a certain fruit until I told him it's hadama, and he didn't believe me outright. I had to prove it to him that this does not grow on a tree. This was, by the way, a watermelon.
Oh, no, really? Like papaya, I can understand.
He was convinced that watermelons grow on trees as a fruit. He wouldn't have it otherwise. I showed him one picture that says that, hey, they can make fake pictures. So, it took a while to convince him that no, watermelons really, I told him I personally went watermelon picking and I picked it from the ground. Yeah. So just imagine how heavy it would be for it to grow on a tree. You would need to have very, very strong branches. Now, it is true that in Georgia, there is a farm already for about 6-7 years that have been growing tree watermelons. It's a hybrid, yeah. They breeded it with something else, I forgot what. But it looks like a watermelon, not as big as the big, the huge ones, but like a nice size, like a cantaloupe-sized watermelon. And when I looked into it, it wasn't for sale yet. They were just, discovering the genetics of it and how it would be able to be marketed. But in general, you need to know the mitzvahs of things to understand what bracha they should receive. And often in Hilchos Brachas, in books of Hilchos Brachas, we see some mistakes because of them not knowing how things grow. In one case example that we'll go through, a certain book on birchas hanehnin wrote that a certain food is ha'etz, according to some opinions. And therefore they said, if you said ha'etz, you're yaitze b'diavad. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It makes no sense. That's not how it grows. So I spoke to the author, and he said, listen, I'll tell you the truth. I never saw how this thing grows. I took it from another book. So he sent me to a different book. I spoke to him. He said, I took it from this book. Until finally he reached the book that everyone took it from. He just assumed how it grew. He didn't know. He didn't know for a second. It grows the way it grows. So this is the shtalshelus of how we have fake news, we have fake brachas, of how brachas can find their way onto food items, and when really they're not. And I will give credit that this confusion is not novel to books of today. Even in the poskim of 200-300 years ago, and even in the Shulchan Aruch, we find this confusion. Also because you have to understand, names sometimes different species were given similar names in different countries, which creates confusion. Mm-hmm. So for example, if people in Poland called strawberries raspberries, okay? Mm-hmm. And they said raspberries are hadama, so you say, here, it says in the poskim that raspberries are hadama. It just says, but no, the raspberries in Poland were strawberries. Mm-hmm. So there's a confusion, and in some cases there's a lot of unclarity of how to determine what they are referring to. What is this fruit that they are referring to that they're saying is ha'etz? Is it the same as the fruit that we refer to in that name? So these are some of the complexities that we face, and we're going to try to clarify the different aspects. Let's first begin with the very basics, and that is as follows. A food product that deserves a ha'etz, which does not have an ha'etz set over it, but rather a hadam or a shahakal, b'diavad you fulfill your obligation. And therefore, the rule of thumb is that whenever there is a true halachic doubt to a fruit's blessing, meaning whether it's a fruit of ha'etz or a vegetable of hadama, then you say hadama. If it's a doubt because you don't know what it is, you walked into your own store and it's the first time you saw this thing and you bought it and didn't bother asking what it is and said, well, it's a doubt, I don't know, I'll just say hadama. No, figure out what it is. So you never saw star fruit before. So you think in your head maybe it grows in the ground. Look it up. Today it's not such a big deal. Back then, before internet, you would have to ask an agronomist, you would have to ask someone who works in agriculture or the fruit or the guy himself in the fruit store, and he may not know. He doesn't work in the farm. He just gets it. So, but today it's very simple. It's very easy to look these things up, and you can discover what their bracha should be. But sometimes it's tricky because we're going to learn some trees are hadama trees. You need to have a ha'etz tree that we'll get to soon. But in general, whenever there's a halachic doubt, you always just demote the blessing to Hadam, you fulfill your obligation. However, if you said a ha'etz on a Hadam, you don't fulfill your obligation because you just elevated its blessing to a higher blessing. The Chacham, when they enacted the nusach of the blessings, they wanted to give different levels for the sake of praising God. So the basic level is Hadam. That's plain. It comes from the ground. That's more than shahakal. Shahakal is just everything. It covers everything. Something that grows from the ground, it's special, we give a Hadam. Something that goes from a tree, fruit, it's even more special, so it receives ha'etz. So a ha'etz will not cover a hadama, and therefore, in a case of that, we always just demote it to hadama. Now, if let's say I have a tomato in front of me, or I have pineapple or watermelon or a banana, which are all hadama products, and I also have a grape or an apple in front of me, and I said hadama, do I still say ha'etz, apple or grape?
Yes.
We just said before, hadama covers everything.
If you don't know what it is, you said if you're in doubt, then you can.
Then that's what you should lechatchila do. But you already did it. Let's say by mistake. I'm not in doubt at all. I know apples grow on trees and they deserve ha'etz. I absentmindedly said hadama. Did I fulfill my obligation? Yes, you did. You do. Yes. Okay. Absentmindedly fulfill your obligation because hadama is ha'etz is included in hadama. Trees, in order for them to grow, must grow on the ground. So you didn't say a lie. When I said Beir pri ha'adama, did I lie in that statement? Can somebody tell me apples don't grow on the ground? So where do they grow? In the air? Right? They're growing on a tree which grows in the ground. I didn't say all the great advantage. I didn't mention the word tree. Okay, but at least I didn't lie. I selectively left out all the truth. I became a politician momentarily. Okay? But I didn't lie. White lie. I said a white lie. I gave the facts that serve my client properly. So, but somebody who says ha'etz on something that grows in the ground, he said a lie. That's not a tree. You lied in your blessing. How can it be a kosher blessing when you said a big lie in your blessing? So this is why we always demote to hadam. So the answer is in this case that you're not yotze because you didn't have it in mind. Only when you intended on the fruit to say hadama do we say hadama covers it. If I didn't intend, I said intend to say hadama on the banana, or on the strawberry, or on the pineapple. And I never intended to exempt the fruit, therefore it's not included at all, and it's mutter to, and you still have to say another bracha on it. So we're going to now go into what makes a tree be determined as a tree. So actually we learned this, I think, 2 years ago in this class, and we're going to review what we said then. We said that there are 3 opinions regarding what trees are defined as trees regarding the blessing of ha'etz, to become a ha'etz blessing. In other words, that this is not a semantic debate of, well, call it a tree, don't call it a tree. It's not an English debate of what can you call a tree in English or an eitz in Hebrew. This is a debate regarding what halachically is required in a tree for it to have the status of a tree that grows fruit that becomes an eitz. So, because when we think about it, let's be honest, what's really the difference between a tree and some of our hadama friends? For example, let's take a very benign hadama product that everyone agrees is hadama, no controversy, a tomato. Ever see how they grow? Big vines, it can even be tall, very tall vines. Look at it. Somebody who never saw tomatoes grow before, and they go into the farm, they go into the agricultural area, see all the tomatoes growing. You can think, oh my gosh, I never saw tomato trees before. So why are tomatoes hadama? Maybe it should be AIDS, right? They also grow nice and high. Bananas. It's a banana tree. Why do we say hadama on bananas? There's many things that the way we see them grow, we may call them a tree. So there's a halachic definition of a tree, and there's three opinions. And the three opinions are based on whether they can weather the seasons. A tree, where does everyone agree, and this is the final halacha, that it's ha'etz? In order for a tree to be defined as a ha'etz tree, it must retain its branches eternally, unless a hurricane comes and knocks it off. And I'm saying it doesn't naturally shed its limbs. It sheds its leaves, fruits in the winter, but not its branches. Its branches, once they grow, they remain. That's a typical tree. The branches stay. Winter, summer, they don't disappear with the year. So that's where everyone agrees it's for sure ha'etz. Anything under that is under debate. Whether it's because it sheds its branches or because it sheds its trunk, meaning not only the branches, but even the trunk itself it sheds. And it regrows every single year. So anything that doesn't contain a year, it doesn't maintain its yearly branches without dissipating and regrowing, is a machlekes if it's ha'etz or hadama, and we will say that its bracha is hadama because, as I said before, in a case of that, we always demote to the blessing that includes them all. So there are a number of examples of fruits that fall into this category. The most famous one, of course, is the banana, that it regrows its trunk every single year. So therefore, we say on a banana hadama. But if you said ha'etz on a banana, because maybe it's a fruit tree, it's a machlekes. We say hadama, b'diavad said ha'etz, not a problem. Some more examples would be papaya and eggplant. Papaya and eggplant grow on what are they called? Perennials? What kind of tree? It's a perennial, but the
annual is the one that dies back every year. The
they're
perennial
annuals.
just keeps going year after year.
Forgot the name. I think they lose. So I don't know what part they lose, but they definitely lose a nice part of their growth during the winter, and therefore, even though we call an eggplant a vegetable, nonetheless, it's a machlekes. Somebody who said ha'etz on eggplant, he would be eitz b'diavad. The papaya we call a fruit, but you have to say hadama because once again it enters this problem as it grows back every year. Because of this, also some poskim hold, Ben Ish Chai holds, papaya doesn't have an isser of arla because it says it's not a tree. But most poskim argue on him, and the Maisa we are machmer that papaya has an arla prohibition. So you have to buy papaya from a reliable source. Now anything that does, there's obviously products that don't enter the debate at all, and that are pure hadam according to all opinions. Let's look at the tomato. What makes him hadam according to all opinions? So the answer is like this: to be defined as a tree, you need to have some forms of actual branches. You need to have a trunk and have branches that come out of some sort, that then things grow off of that. But whenever the fruit grows directly on like the trunk, such as when you have the vine of the tomato, so it's growing directly on the vine, so it's not considered a tree at all. It's not defined at all as a tree, and that's why it is a pure hadama. Another example of that would be strawberries. Strawberries are a pure hadama because they do not grow on a trunk that contains a branch that grows off the trunk. They grow directly, similar to tomatoes. It's very soft. It's a very soft vine. It's not thick. So that's some of the ways that we can tell whether it's a pure hadama or whether it's a debatable hadama. And of course, the opinion would be, if I said ha'etz on strawberries, do I have to now say hadama? The answer would be yes. The same way if you said ha'etz on a tomato, you would have to say hadama because it's not ha'etz at all.
Tomatoes do grow on branches.
But I don't know.
But the trunk, again, they have to have a thick trunk.
Yeah.
A thick trunk, not a vine trunk, and have a branch grow on the trunk. Here, it's all the same material. It's the difference between the branch and the trunk itself. Okay. Blackberries.
Mm.
In halacha, they are called yakdas hashchayim. Yakdos hashchayim. Blackberries. That's what they're called in Hebrew as well. So according to halacha, they are ha'etz because they grow on bushes, which are in essence trees. The bush contains. We call them bushes in English. We don't call them a tree, but that's because it's low and it grows very bushy. It's not like tall and like a tree is, but nonetheless, that makes halachically no difference. The fact is, it has a strong trunk. It's not a vine. It has branches that grow from the trunk, and the fruits grow in it. So there's no halacha which states that trees must reach a certain height to become ha'etz. So even if you have midget trees, they're still ha'etz. Blueberries are also ha'etz for the same reason. They grow on bushes which do not fall apart each year. Now raspberries enter the machlekes and confusion that I mentioned earlier. Some write that raspberries are hadama. And they say that the source for this is from the fact that it says it explicitly in the Shulchan Aruch. It says that malina is hadama, and malina is raspberries in Yiddish and in Czech, meaning the Czech language. That's what they call it, malina. So when you look into the word, it says malinas are hadama and malinas are raspberries. However, many other poskim rule that it is ha'etz. So instead of arguing, let's just go look at a raspberry bush. Let's look at it. How does it grow? What does it look like? So I remember when I looked into this, I discovered a few things. When I looked into how the raspberries grow, I could not see any reason why it should be a hadama, meaning that they should be ha'etz. I didn't see any reason why. What makes the growth of a raspberry bush different than a blueberry or than a blackberry, that it should be hadama. But I also discovered that there's different types of raspberries. There's different types, and there are raspberries, there are species of raspberries sold as raspberries that they do fall apart in the winter. So it really depends on what raspberry is being marketed. Now, I don't know if the raspberries that referred to over here, we're saying malina is the same type of raspberry that looks similar to a blackberry, which is just black, that they were referring to. It could be that they were maybe referring to something more similar to a cranberry. So this is where it's unclear. It's unclear what were they referring to, and if we have different, if it has different species of how it grows, then obviously it would be, even if in English we're calling them the same name, it would be determined, the bracha would be determined based on the difference. So if I have a file on this here. So here in Tzfas, we kind of avoid the issue because do we have raspberries available to buy?
No.
At least not fresh, right? No fresh raspberries. The ones that are available, I see that it says the tchina bovad, only for crushing, and then of course they lose their bracha without question. They become shahak. Okay, so let's see here. Anything I wrote in it? Okay, so my conclusion is that I don't really have a conclusion regarding raspberries. It's different luchos write different things, and again, there's different types. So I don't know what to say. So maybe say hadam and ha'etz and two different fruits. Take a different. But if you take but don't take a banana, because by saying hadam on a banana,
Yeah.
you're entering a machlekes of what the bracha really is. So if you escape one machlekes, you're entering another machlekes. But take a tomato or a strawberry, say hadam on that, and say ha'etz on a real ha'etz. Of course, nuts, they all grow on trees, and therefore we say ha'etz over them, with exception to peanuts, which are hadam. Right? They grow on the ground. So peanuts are hadam.
Right.
Jalapeno peppers.
Mm.
Jalapeno peppers, chili peppers.
Don't eat them, you don't have to worry about them.
So they're very healthy, supposedly. They're very, very healthy. Yeah. They help lower cholesterol. They burn the fat out of the body. Anyway, so jalapenos is our machlekes, what the bracha is, and even though they grow on what's similar to a tree, nonetheless, they're not really meant to be eaten plain, unless you're a Mexican. I don't know, maybe they do eat it plain there, but usually people don't pick up a hot pepper and chomp on it. It's eaten with something else. So because of this, there's a suffix in the bracha, and therefore we say hadam on jalapeno. Bottom line, we say hadam on jalapeno. Ginger, what bracha do we make on ginger? Shahako. If it's ground, what if it's not ground? Fresh ginger is hadam, as it's the root and not the fruit. On roots, we say hadam.
Also on the one that's, I don't know what it's called. It's like got sugar. It's like a sweet.
Oh, dry ginger, yeah.
Candied ginger.
Candied ginger. We're still so. It depends. If it's an actual piece of ginger that's been dried out, then it would remain hadama. But if it's, they took ginger and they ground it and then added other additives and made this thing, then no, it's shahako.
Shahako.
Would depend how it's made. Again, would depend how it's made. In the dried fruit industry, there's a lot of shady stuff going on. You have to know what you're really getting. It's for example, they have the dried strawberries. Are you really getting a dried strawberry, or are you getting a strawberry that was ground, had 90% of other ingredients added to it, and it was now turned into a strawberry-looking shape that looks like a strawberry and is being sold to you? So it's obviously that would be shahako, because it's ground. And you have with others. I mean, generally, if let's say dried apples, it's a dried apple. There's not much alterations that can be done with that. But there are some dried fruits which you really don't know what you're getting. Cinnamon sticks. So cinnamon sticks grow on a tree. On a tree. The bark. Right.
But you can't eat them,
Right.
really.
So it's hadama. It's hadama because we don't eat it. Even though it grows in the bark, it's not common to eat plain, and therefore it would be hadama.
So if you have tea with a cinnamon stick in it,
well, there it's tuffle. It's secondary to the
so you
tea.
wouldn't.
So you just say a shahakal on the tea. But somebody who likes chewing cinnamon sticks, which I heard is not such a good idea for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe that's above the mice. I don't know. But no, they're cloggers. I know that for sure from experience. They clog up my drain. They clog up filters. They're big cloggers. They stick together and they clog everything else. Maybe do that in the body as well. I have no idea. But anyways, but the mice, if you want to chew on a cinnamon stick, it would be hadama. Ground cinnamon, anyways, is shahak because it's ground. Licorice, and I mean the root, not not what they sell, not the candy. So that is hadama. It's a root. If you're eating plain licorice, real licorice.
Yeah. The first one, sticks. They're like woody sticks. You go to the gum shop.
Fruits that aren't ripe. If you're desperate for a fruit and it's not ripe yet, you don't have time to wait another week, 2 weeks, what bracha do you say? So if they're only edible in a time of need, then you say hadama. If they haven't reached a state of edibility for all people, they are hadama and not ha'etz.
Oh, so they don't have to
When is it a Torah prohibition to eat unripe fruits?
One second on this point. One second. Okay, so I want to clarify that point regarding unripe fruits. There's a few levels here of unripe fruits. We have one level, which is this food is just completely not edible, and I don't know then why you're eating it, that no bracha would be said at all. Okay, so if it's so raw, so unripe that it's just not edible at all, then you wouldn't say any blessing. But if it's, like, I don't know, avocado, that's, you would like it to be more mushy, more soft. In that case, you would say in ha'etz. It would only be demoted. It would only be demoted in a case that it's really most people won't eat it because it's just too bitter or too sour. Let's say a pear, okay? A pear that's hard, it's still perfectly edible. It's delicious, it's still edible. It's just you like soft ones. What's wrong with the hard ones? So you have to use your teeth a little stronger. That's all. So that would still retain its ha'etz. So that's a clarification of what I said before. The determination wouldn't be if people wait for it to soften more, or rather, is it physically too sour, or is it good enough to be eaten in a time of need? Seeds of fruits and vegetables. In general, all seeds they have a change of a blessing. Meaning, even though I took the seeds out of the fruit and I want to eat them and they came from a fruit, they would not receive the ha'etz, as they're considered secondary to the fruit itself. So, for example, pumpkin seeds and watermelon seeds. They are naturally bitter, so they're not really part of the fruit that you would eat, and therefore their blessing would, if you ate them plain, you wouldn't say a blessing at all, and if you baked them or roasted them, then you would just say a blessing of shahakal over it. However, some poskim say that things have changed today. Back in the day, watermelon seeds and pumpkin seeds were part of all seeds, which is not cultivated for the purpose of the seed. If somebody decided, I don't know, to cook down an avocado pit and eat it, and some people do this, then you would say shahakal. Shahakal, yeah. The inside of the avocado pit, yeah.
It's very good. Good? It's good. It's good for you.
So, but it wouldn't be ha'etz, even though you're claiming, well, I eat all the avocado pits I can find, I treat it just like the fruit, it doesn't matter, it's not cultivated for that purpose. Okay, as of now, it is still a minority. However, so the same thing by all seeds, even if you make it edible through, let's say, cooking it or through roasting it, it would still only retain a shahakal bracha. It becomes demoted completely from the blessing of its fruit. However, today that they cultivate watermelons and pumpkins in order to make seeds and sell the roasted seeds, so perhaps it should be elevated back to its bracha of hadama. So some say that pumpkin seeds and watermelon seeds would be hadama.
Sunflower seeds also?
Regarding sunflower seeds, as far as I know, sunflower seeds are hadama. That is the actual fruit. They're not the seed of a food. They are the actual fruit, and they're obviously cultivated for that purpose. But
So if you buy those dried sunflower seeds,
hadama.
you say hadama?
Yeah. But they say that people who eat those in public are pasul. Invalid for testimony.
Okay.
No. Yeah. Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch lists various different
Because
criteria in order to be a valid witness.
it's not famous.
Someone who has a proven record of just being, sloppy, being not caring about, no shame, he eats in the middle of the street, then he's postulated. It's very different than the secular world, where anyone, even if the guy was on drugs at the time that he saw what was happening, you bring him in because he says something that goes for your side. In halacha, we have a very strong limitation and regulation of who's allowed in to testify, who we can trust to testify. And this is really done in Batei Dinim. Let's say, for example, I'll give an example. 2 witnesses, kosher Jews, that you assume the kosher witnesses come in, and they said, we saw this woman do this and this sin. According to halacha, she has to get divorced from her husband. So before the bezdin goes anywhere else, let's check you guys out. You're saying the woman's a sinner. Let's check your backgrounds.
Mhm.
And if we see this guy eats garinim, you see they walked by and they saw, lo and behold, at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, in the shuk, he's spitting garinim, talking with his friend. The woman's kosher, and he's the one not kosher. He's a puzzle witness.
Wow.
It's not just garinim. If he's eating a shawarma while walking, he's walking, eating a falafel. If someone does things that's considered
Without
shameful in
cigarette
public.
butts. Right.
Well, some hold that someone correct. There are some rabbanim who hold someone who smokes as a puzzle witness. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not the
Not the norm.
it's not the widely accepted way of ruling. But there are rabbanim who rule that way, to the extent that they tell people who weren't sure whether their witnesses by their wedding smoked. They tell them to do a new one due to suffix, do a new wedding. You don't have to, hire a hall and get catering again. Just it says come with 2 witnesses, kosher witnesses this time, and we'll do the wedding again. Buy another ring, Okay. Sugar. So practically, sugar is shahakol, although theoretically, sugar is ha'etz. Sugar grows on a very hard cane. It's not a vine. It hurts a lot to be caned by a sugar cane. And because of this, it grows from the ground. It grows in a very hard cane. There are some poskim who wanted to say perhaps we should treat it like a tree. And it should be ha'etz. But practically, even though halachically it seems like it should follow some of the statuses of a ha'etz, practically we are noyig to say shahakol. That's the minhag of all Klal Yisrael. Maybe in Yemen, in previous generations, they used to say ha'etz on sugar. But today, everybody says shahakol on sugar, and that's the halacha. But b'diavad, if you said ha'etz on sugar, you're yaitz. So somebody who had a sugar-coated dried fruit, and it was discovered in the end, the dried fruit, you said ha'etz on this, or you said adama on this. In the end, it really was discovered that it was made from maybe 10% ground strawberry, and the rest was just sugar. It's shahakol. Sugar itself is a machlekes what its bracha is. So therefore, b'diavad, you're yaitze. Lemons. What bracha do you say on lemons? In the winter, it's very healthy to have a lemon a day, right? Fresh lemon. What bracha do we say?
That's an eight.
So this is tricky because it definitely grows on a tree. There's no issue with the lemon tree. We have no issues with the tree itself. We have an issue with the way it's eaten. Lemons are not commonly eaten plain. They're commonly added to foods. But most people don't chomp down lemons. They take a bite out of an apple, out of a citric fruit such as an orange, but not lemons. So therefore, because they're not viewed as edible in their current state, therefore they are demoted to shahakol. If they're so sour you can't eat it, then they don't get any bracha. But if they're, just a little sour and you can eat it, then they would be demoted to shahakol. In the Maisa, we say shahakol on lemons.
I mean, if you're eating it plain?
Cannot say ha'etz on a lemon, because generally people do not eat plain lemons.
We wouldn't be demoted to Hadama.
In this case, we demote it to shahakol, yeah.
What about sunflower seeds? Because they're,
As I said before, they're hadama. They're definitely not ha'etz, they don't grow on a tree.
but maybe they're shahakol because maybe the plants are cultivated for oil.
That's why, no, they're cultivated for their seed also, definitely. And even the oil is made from the seed. It's all cultivated for the seed.
Oh.
That's for sure hadama. Sabras. Sabras is known as the Israeli fruit, right? The fruit that grows without water. The fruit that grows from cactus. So they are ha'etz. They are pure trees. We may not like them so much. The trees themselves, they're very thorny, but it's ha'etz. Bananas, as we already said, is our classic machlekes of how trees grow, and therefore it would be hadama. Okay, we're going to get back to some more hadama versus shahakol versus ha'etz situations when we get to discussing soups and regarding ground stuff. For the time being, we'll move on now to shahakol. So the rule by shahakol is as follows. Anything that doesn't grow from the ground, and definitely not on a tree, is shahakol. That's the rule. So that includes everything else. Shahakol is an all-inclusive blessing, including salt. If a person tastes salt, you say shahakol on it. It's kind of a strange halacha because most people don't eat plain salt.
Mhm.
So I would assume that salt should not receive any bracha. And the case is that salt does receive a bracha. Even if you're eating a small amount of it, you say a bracha of shahakol over it. Likewise, as you know, mushrooms are shahakol as they do not grow from the ground, but rather they grow from the air and not the ground. They grow from the fungus that's on the earth. Therefore, they do not receive a blessing of hadama. All drinks are all shahakol, irrelevant from how they're made, from what they're made. Even a protein shake, which contains flour, is shahakol. So everything that flows like a liquid and is drank like a liquid becomes shahakol. Now here we enter the question of wine or grape juice. What bracha should be said on wine or grape juice? Wine and grape juice is the one exception the sages made by a drink and said not only is the wine/grape juice not going to be demoted from its blessing of the fruit, as is every other drink that it's demoted to shahakol, but furthermore, we're going to actually elevate it to give it hagafen. Hagafen is a higher blessing than ha'etz. That's what the halach is. You by mistake said in a cup of grape juice or wine, because you said an inclusive blessing. It definitely grows on a tree. You didn't lie. Wine doesn't grow on a tree, but the fruit grows on a tree.
It's not a tree.
It's a tree. Grapes? It's ha'etz, sure.
It's not a tree though. We have grape in our
You may not call them a tree in English. In halach, it's called a tree. That's why we say ha'etz over grapes.
Yeah, I know you say, but
It's like a bush, but it's
not
like
even a bush,
tomatoes.
it's a vine.
Tomatoes and I don't know.
It's not similar to tomato. Study tomato vines versus grapevines.
They do.
They're different. They're not exactly the same. Yeah. Again, you don't have to have a thick brown trunk that can stand to the forces of winds. Even if you're a little soft, not as soft as a vine, but you're soft. Okay, and in Neiron they have the vineyards there. I studied them a few times. They follow all the regulations of a tree. They are a pure tree, from what I saw.
I have some vitamin C medication. It's in powder form. It's very, very, very sour. So I put it in grape juice. But you don't make a bracha on something that's medicine, do you? So
Medicine, you don't say a bracha unless it's tasty. For example, when you give a kid a strawberry flavored syrup, then it's tasty. For him, he doesn't think he's drinking medicine. He thinks he's drinking candy. Of course, you say a bracha. But in a case where it's medicine in general, you don't say a bracha. But in the case you're adding with grape juice, you have to say a bracha on the grape juice.
On the grape juice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because you enjoy it. Okay, so our question is like this. What happens when you mix water with wine and grape juice? Who wins? Water is shahakal. Wine, grape juice is hagafen. I have now both of them together. Now, in the wine industry and possibly grape juice industry, there is water added. The question is how much? What's the ratio? So, here in Israel, it used to be that they would add 83% water. 83% water. 17% wine, which was the minimum for wine to retain its hagafen status, according to many poskim. And this is the widespread Ashkenazi custom. So even though wine has a 1-to-6, okay, 1-to-6 ratio of wine to water, nonetheless it would be hagafen. However, the Sfardim and some Ashkenazi poskim are very stringent, and they hold that it must be no less than 50%. It has to be over 50% wine, so no more than 49% water. If it is, then it's considered shahakal. The water wins. We follow majority. So this is a major machlekes. Back in the day, Sfardim would not purchase wine made by Ashkenaz. And the problem is that all the wine factories followed the Ashkenazi Shita. Even the Eidah Charedis, when they gave their stamp of Ashgacha, they didn't require there to be more than 17% wine. So because of this, Sfardim did not have wine to drink. What would they do? They would have people in their houses would make their own wine. Or they would have to, due to lack of choice, become Ashkenazi. They would just have to follow Ashkenazi Shita because they had lack of choice. Some of the Sephardi Rabbanim came out very strongly against this. For example, one of the Sephardi Rabbanim talked to the head of the Eidah Charedis, this is in the 70s or the 60s, from Bengen, and he told him, how can you guys write Badatz, Beis Din Tzedek, on the grape juice and say it's Mahadran when it's Shahakal according to us? So we said, continue reading the stamp. He says, what do you mean the stamp? I see it says Badatz, Eidah Charedis, Mahadran. It's a big lie. You're fooling people. He says, excuse me, we're not fooling anybody. What does it say at the end of the stamp? Le'edat Ashkenazim. So we're Badatz Mahadran for Ashkenazim. We're not saying we're good for Sfardim. We never claimed that. This was their excuse. So a number of Sephardi came out and publicized to everybody, avoid these wines. Basically, avoid all wines. You have to make your own wine because all the wines today are corrupted. They're 83% water, and for us, it's shahakal. I once invited Avad Yosef to do Shava brachas by an Ashkenazi chuppah, and he was holding the cup, and he was given the bracha of hagafen, and he said shahakal niha b'dvar. To make his point that he couldn't, he said, I can't. I'm not allowed to say hagafen. It's us for me. But Baruch Hashem, today things have changed. Today things have changed, and the status quo of the wines made by under the Eidah Charedis and other hashgachas is far more than 50%. They require there be 33%, 67%, 67% wine, just 2/3. It has to have 2/3 wine, and this satisfies the opinion of the Tzemach Tzedek. If we think Sfardim are machmir, Chabad is even more machmir in this. Chabad requires 67% wine. So for us, it would be usher to say, according to the Tzemach Tzedek, we would not be allowed to say hagafen on wines that don't meet this ratio. And because of this, as I spoke to Rav Lando in Bnei Brak, passed away already, but because of this, they would make their own wines. Till today, he makes his own wine. They don't buy wine. Not even wine under his hashgacha. They make their own wine because of this issue with the ratio. Now today, it satisfies it. But they already started making their own wines back then. They just continue with the tradition. They don't rely on wines made by anybody else. So they make their own wine. It's 100% wine. No water is involved. But you have up to 33%. Now today, they have, how do you know? So the hashgacha really has to be the ones in charge of this. They have to be the ones who are making sure that it's not having water added to it to the point of it's more than 67%. Because let's be honest, the wineries, they're here not to give us good products. They're here to make money. That's in essence their intention. Maybe the individual winer, the vinter, he has some intent, not just on his pocketbook, but also to make good wine. But who owns it? He's interested in money. Now, if you can sell the same thing with, if you get double the amount of wine for your money, meaning if they get double the amount of money for their wine because they added 50% water, so why wouldn't they do it? What's going to stop them from doing it? And this is why originally the industry put in 87% water, because they could, and nobody was making an issue about it. So they did, and they made more money. Same thing in the meat factory. In the meat factory, what do? They take meat, meat from a cow. With chickens, I haven't seen this done, but with cow meat, animal meat, they definitely do this too. They put it in this huge industrial machine together with water and phosphate and who knows what other chemicals and stuff in there. They're pouring all these huge bags of stuff into this thing. They have it soaked there for about 12 hours. And what looked like a piece of meat that was, this size, comes out a piece of meat this size. And then they sell it per kilo. And then when you cook it and you wonder, how did this now become this? That's why. So some of them, they're nice and they write, they write in the thing, only 30% fattened or only 40% fattened with water, mefutam. But often, even what they write, they don't follow. And this, they're trying to get the most out of their product. Bottom line is, so this needs hashgacha. This needs supervision to make sure it's going to be followed through. I asked once a friend of mine who had his own winery, and he wrote on the bottles was written 100% wine. So I asked him regarding Pesach, is it really 100% wine? So are you guys really careful? So we can dip matzah in it or eat it with matzah, etc. So he says, take this as a rule in the entire wine industry in Israel. 100% wine means 70%. We add 30% water.
So now what do we don't put it in the wine?
Okay, that's a side point. That's a side discussion, if we do or don't.
But
the point is that you said that, they write 100% wine, it's really 70%. When Rabbi Yaakov Yosef was a member of the Knesset in Israel, he wanted to help pass a law together with other members of the Knesset that would make it illegal to change from a certain amount of percentage of water that they wanted to cap the amount of water you can enter into the wine. And they were going to pass it in the Knesset as a law, and they were going to fine companies, big monies for transgressing this. And they said that all the wine companies in Israel got together and they told the Knesset, if you do this, we're not going to market any more wine into Israel. We're just going to market it to Chutz La'aretz. There'll be no wine in Israel. They got together and they threatened them. And because of that, there were some members of Knesset that backed off and they didn't have enough votes and it never passed. So till today, there's no law in this. There's no law. They can do whatever they want. And therefore, we need to trust the hashgacha. So because of the past history, Many Sephardim till today don't trust the hashgachas, and they say, "Oh, it's shahakal." You give them a badatz wine, they say it's shahakal. They don't trust them. They don't trust anybody. They had bad experiences in the
So
past.
So did you have special Sephardi wine?
Correct. So they have special wines that are individually looked at and made. And I'll give one example. He said the following story that happened with. This story happened. He's actually Ashkenazi with Dov Landau. He's a Ger Chassid. He's used to be part of the Sam Sefer B'nai Brak Hashgacha. He's not anymore. But he was also in charge of wine hashgachas in various wineries. And in one winery, they wanted to get a hashgacha of 100% wine. He considered 100% wine, no water added at all. But this was not for the bracha's sake, because according to everybody, once you've reached 67, you're for sure hagafen. So there's no issue with having a little bit of water. To make sure they don't put more is another question. But they wanted to make 100% wine for Pesach purposes. And they wanted to get a hashgacha that it's guaranteed to be 100% wine for Pesach. So we visit this winery. It was, I'm not going to mention the name of the winery, but it's a known winery. And the Mankal, the head of the winery, shows them around, and they show how everything's done. Absolutely no water added to the grapes at all, to the wine at all. And he asked them, well, how do you transfer the wine to the companies who order them? People who order the wine from you, how do you transfer it? Because they were transferred in like these huge containers. It wasn't sold as bottles. It was sold more for the production of different products for Pesach, for companies. So, well, these are the containers. So he asked them, well, do these containers, are they washed? He says, of course they're washed, but they're all dried out, and they're prepared for stacking the wine in them. So he walked over to one of the containers that were on the line to receive, there was a whole line of containers receiving wine. So he took one of them out, and he went like this to it, and a whole bunch of water splashed on the mankal. Wow. He says, what are you doing? What is this? You're splashing me with water. What are you doing to me? He said, but I thought you said it's dry. I thought you said it's dry. So they did not pass the inspection, and they did not get the hashgacha.
But the thing is that when we drink wine, it tastes so strong. Maybe you need that water, because maybe it would be just.
So first of all, as I said, up to 33%, you're for sure good. You're for sure good. Number two, that is not the reason why they're adding water. They're adding water because it helps them have more. It's cheaper. They get more money for their products. Very simple. We should never suspect the food industry for doing something actually for our benefit. It's they're trying to cut every end possible. Okay.
No, I'm just saying.
I'll give you an example. Okay? I'll give you two examples that I witnessed. That there was one time a malfunction in the electricity in the meat it's a meat department. It's not a meat department. It's a schlachthouse basically where they would receive shechted chicken. Raw shechted chicken and prepare it for marketing, as well as they would receive from overseas meat, lots and lots of meat, frozen meat. So they would have these huge freezers that if you walked inside, it was like walking into Antarctica. Literally, it was like
freezing,
absolutely freezing. Like you can die if you're there for like 5 minutes straight without problem. Anyway, so there was a malfunction, and one of the freezers was out for a while. And the meats were already beginning to defrost. And what did the workers do? They didn't throw out the meat. They threw it into a different freezer. So I asked them, this is not legal. You can't do this. He says, so long as the doctor's in his office, everything's allowed. They have a doctor. They have a rofeh, according to law. By every meat industry, by every meat manufacturing plant, you need to have a doctor there, and for health reasons, to make sure. So that's what they told me, that so long as the doctor's not around, it's okay. The doctor's in his office. So that was one example. Another example is that we're once cleaning the freezers, and we saw a huge pile of different meats that all had their dates passed by. So I mentioned it to the person in charge. I said, listen, the dates have expired from all these meats that are here. So he says, thanks for telling me, no problem. I walk into the freezer about half hour, 45 minutes later. I see an Arab worker there putting on new stamps with new dates.
Kidding.
No, I'm not joking. And here too, I was told, so long as the doctor's is in his office, it's no problem. It's illegal to get caught.
That's very scary.
I'm being honest. This is the food industry. The food industry is not here for our benefit. They are money. I'm not saying, oh, well, maybe you have some tzaddikim this day. Maybe there are some tzaddikim out there who really, really care about the people eating their product. But that's how it is. Whenever you make something in huge bulk, your mind doesn't begin thinking about that individual who's going to eat it on his plate. You know, you cut corners and you do what you need in order so your business thrives. It's, I think that's in every business. Obviously, you want to make sure, but with food, it's as long as it tastes good, it still tastes okay. So you can bend the law. Now we have. I have to mention that there's another major issue with wines today. That's another reason why some poskim, as well as many Sfardim, avoid the wines. Nothing to do with the water ratio. Let's make believe it's 100% wine, no water. They have another issue, which is not an issue specifically to Sfardim. Many Sfardim Rabbanim join the bandwagon of making it of agreeing it's a problem, but also Ashkenazi poskim have mentioned the issue of this, and that is as follows: in today's wine manufacturing, they add sulfur to the product. Now that's done for preservation. If you don't add it, it's sitting on the shelf for 2-3 weeks. It'll start becoming what's called in Hebrew, in halacha, kimchen, like flour. It will be like this white stuff, white substance will begin growing, which is like mold, basically. It begins growing like mold from the fermentation. So how do they keep it fresh? They put gofrit, sulfur. So some poskim, Ashkenazim and Sfardim, both say that this gofrit, this sulfur, in essence, kills it from being wine anymore. It's considered panim chadashis. It's no longer considered wine. It changes it from wine to a shahakal beverage. And they say that in today's wine industry and grape juice industry, it's all shahakal. Majority of poskim don't rule this way, and that's why, according to majority of poskim, it's not a problem. You can say hagafen on wine and grape juice. This, and of course, if they're following the rule of, at least majority wine, or for Chabad 67% wine, it's not a problem. But there are a minority of poskim who consider the gofrit, the sulfur, to have altered the wine from its innocent status, and therefore they say it's not considered wine anymore. So they will not say hagafen on wine unless it's pure wine, 100%. And they have private winers make this. Private people make their own wine, and it doesn't last very long because you can't add gofrit, you can't add. But if you look, almost all grape juices and wines, they all have it in the ingredients.
There was a guy who used to make birchas here.
What did he make?
Birchas, it was called.
Birchas of wine?
Yeah, it was lovely.
Well, I'm sure, but standard wine is all made with
Here's
gofrit.
a
Otherwise,
Sulfur-free, yeah. So what do they do?
well, it's not just has to be sulfur-free. It has to be sulfur-free and also free of any other additives that can.
Right.
So if you got rid of sulfur, because now, there's a lot of food fads in the world. So, if you got rid of the sulfur fad and you entered something else to preserve it, then the shiloh would still be the same shiloh. Because if you can't make magical wine that will have all the benefits of putting sulfur into it and without sulfur, what are you doing? You're obviously adding something to it.
Okay, but we say hagafen, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there are people who don't be surprised if you ever hear someone. There's people who are part of the wine bashing coalition. They're not anti-wine. They're anti the wines of today that are sold. So understand where they're coming from. This is where they're coming from.
Do they do any messing with Shemitah wine?
Shemitah wine. What's your question? Like, what do they do to it? Same process.
Yeah, they do the same process.
Same process.
And they put sulfite in it.
Yeah. That's why you can have Shemitah wine. I got a shot the other day of Shemitah wine from the previous Shemitah. How does it last so many years? Okay, that's our Shahakal section. We're now going to move on to. Oh, okay. There's actually 2 more halachas that we're going to review. So this is a famous halacha regarding water, that water is the one case of a food or drink that we at times do not say a bracha over, because water does not have any distinctive taste. So since the whole purpose of a blessing is to bless God for the benefit, if I'm not having a direct benefit from the item itself, I wouldn't say a bracha. And halach is like this: water that's being drunk because you're thirsty, that is a benefit. It is quenching your thirst, so therefore you would say a bracha. But if you're drinking it, let's say for example, the doctor says you need to have 3 liters a day. I am not thirsty at all. I'm just drinking it because I'm like a camel that needs to carry water. You don't say a bracha over it. If I'm drinking in order to swallow a pill, you don't say a bracha over it. If I'm drinking it for any reason that does not involve quenching my thirst, you do not say a bracha on water. However, if the water has some taste to it, even if it's just a minor taste of, let's say, tea, a tea taste, any taste already is a benefit, and you have to say a bracha. Okay, we're now going to discuss in the next chapter about cooked fruits and vegetables. So, at times, if a fruit or vegetable is cooked, it can lose its blessing, and at times it can gain its blessing. Meaning, at times, a raw fruit or raw vegetable is not ha'etz. For example, potatoes. What bracha do you say when you eat them raw? You don't eat them raw, and that's why those who do eat them raw would have to say a shahakal. People used to eat them raw. Potatoes used to be eaten raw, just like other vegetables. Today, for some reason, we don't do it, and therefore, it only becomes hadama once it is cooked, once it is baked. So, regarding some things, we find that it actually becomes elevated once it's cooked or baked, because then it becomes more edible, while by others, it actually becomes demoted because it becomes worse. So, for example, if somebody cooked watermelon, it would go down to shahakal. It would go from hadama to shahakal. And so on and so forth with any fruit or vegetable that becomes demoted. It loses its taste or loses its status to a lower status once it is cooked. Another example given in the Shulchan Aruch is carrots. Back in the day, carrots were not eaten raw, and therefore they were shahakal, raw carrots. Only when you cooked them did they become hadama. However, today, since majority of people eat raw carrots, they are hadama. But they're hadama in both stages, whether in a cooked state or whether in a raw state, as they are both good. People eat them in both states. They're both good. Other examples of foods that when they're raw don't receive a bracha, and only when they're cooked they don't receive the hadama bracha. And when they cook, there are beets. Even though you could eat raw beets are edible, but nonetheless, since most people cook beets, correct? Most people cook beets, most people don't eat them raw. Then you would say shahakal if it is not cooked. Now, if somebody were to bring us statistics in this city or in this country, most people eat raw beets. Everyone eats it regularly, just like they eat cooked beets. So, okay, then we would change the halacha. The same way carrots changed from time to time, so too beets can change, and so do with anything else. If it becomes the derech, it becomes the common practice to eat it or not eat it, then the bracha would change accordingly. What's your question?
Like a lot of people, I mean, this was true in Israel 30 years ago. I don't know if this is the same now, but people used to make pickled beets and have that
So pickled is already a form of cooking. Pickled, when you pickle something, is a form of cooking. So here we're talking now raw beets. People grate beets and eat it raw. They have a beet salad like that. The question is, what is it called? It has a name. No? Beet salad? No, it has a different name. Okay. Beets. Well, you can make beet salad also from cooked beets. It doesn't have to be raw. Anyways, there is a dish that involves raw beets, the same way there's a dish that involves raw meat. The question is that considered something that majority of people eat commonly? Is it considered common? Eggplants. Most people eat eggplants only when they're cooked.
Mhm.
Okay, so therefore, if somebody decides to eat it raw, they wouldn't say hadama, they would say shahako. Turnips, same thing. Anything that people generally eat don't eat when raw, only when cooked, it only becomes hadama when cooked.
So beets, if they're raw, are shehakol.
Mhm.
I would say it's dependent on how common it is for people to eat raw beets. In my house, we never eat raw beets. Whenever we eat beets, it's cooked.
In your house, though?
It wouldn't change. We follow here the society. Yeah, we wouldn't make it dependent on every individual. This is a society, so it depends. It could be in some countries where it's commonly done. Then how common is raw beet salad? I don't know. I have to look into it.
If you put it with
But we
carrots,
follow a
would you
majority of people.
make hadama?
Carrots would be hadama if we follow the main ingredient. What's the main ingredient?
If you just say
Yeah,
hadama.
yeah, Yeah, but it would definitely be a shiloh to say hadama just on the raw beets, correct? Onions. Onions, another example. We would think that onions, when they're cooked, they're hadama, because then they're edible, while if they're raw, should be shahako, right? Because people don't eat raw onions. But the truth is, the halacha is the opposite. Raw onions are hadama, cooked onions are shahako. Who can tell me why? Why does this seemingly break everything we just
Anything to
established?
do with Pesach? Or no?
No, nothing to do with taste.
Okay.
So the truth is that we do eat raw beets. It is
Raw
not raw
onions.
beets,
Raw
raw
onions.
onions. It is extremely common to eat raw
Yeah.
onions in salads.
Yeah.
So we do eat raw onions. So therefore, I agree. We don't take an onion out of the fridge and say shahako and eat it, or hadama and eat it. But we do eat raw onions in salad. Therefore, somebody who would decide to eat a raw onion would say hadama. That's the bracha. We say hadama. Not everyone agrees. So this is the ruling of the Alter Rebbe in the Seder birchas hanehnin, and so rule many poskim. And this is the way we rule. We say hadama on a raw onion. When I once taught this in yeshiva, one of my students was fresh from Russia, and he had a very difficult time understanding this statement that people don't generally eat raw onions if it is not in a salad. He said, this is what we grew up on. And the next day, lo and behold, he brought an onion to class, and he ate it when everyone else was eating their fruits. He ate a raw onion. Yes. Like it was a fruit.
Like an apple.
Like an apple, yes.
Oh, wow.
So, but nonetheless, everybody, even those who won't do that, they will eat it in a salad, and therefore it retains its hadama status. Now, the opposite, if you cook it, it becomes ruined. It loses everything.
Yeah.
Cooked onions they're pointless. What do? They give taste. We're trying to squeeze everything out of them, and once the taste is removed, they don't really have anything to them anymore, and therefore they are demoted to shahako. A cooked onion is shahako. Now, what about onion rings? They're tasty. They've gone up. So onion rings are mezainis anyways, because the main part is the flour. So they're mezainis. But let's say fried onions. Just fried onions. I want to eat fried onions. So the chayra, they would retain their hadama state, as they have not gone down in quality. They have actually, you can argue, gone up in quality, and therefore they would retain the hadama state.
Sorry, the adama?
Raw onions is
The
hadama.
fried onion.
Fried onions would also be hadama, and cooked onions are shahako.
What's the difference between cooked and fried?
Because when you cook it, it loses all of its taste. While when you fry it, fried onions taste very good.
What do you
It's a
mean by
taste
cooked?
difference.
What do you mean by cooked?
In a soup, water. Regarding spices, only salt receives the shahako. Other spices, if you want to taste it, like you want to taste ground pepper, cumin, you don't say any bracha on it at all, is that it's not meant to be a food. It's not meant to be a literal food. Now, why salt is different to this, I don't know, but that is clearly written in the Paiskin that we say shahakal on salt, but other spices you wouldn't apply it to. Now we're going to move on to ground foods, foods that have been ground. So when you grind a food, same way we said sometimes cooking a food can demote its state, so to grinding a food can demote its state. So if I grind, for example, nuts, I don't know, peanuts, and I grind them, so if I still have pieces involved, and they're hadama. But if they're not pieces anymore, they're now peanut butter, so it is shahakal. Why? It comes from it's not a drink. You don't drink peanut butter, right? It's food. Nonetheless, it's shahakal because it's lost its original state of how it's eaten. Nuts, ground nuts that have become like flour, not piecey, would also be shahakal for that reason. Now, what about fruit leather?
Shahakal.
So fruit leather we actually rule as eights, but that's only if it's real fruit leather. What's fake fruit leather? Fake fruit leather is where they grind the fruit together with a million other stuff, and they print it out as sheets. Okay, so it's ground. Everything here is ground. It's not flattened fruit. This is fruit that has been destroyed, has been grounded, and has also many other additives added to it. That's not real. So fruit roll-up would be shahakal, for example. Okay? Yeah, it contains a little bit of fruit, but it's part of all the other ground ingredients. However, real fruit leather made from real fruit is basically flattened fruit. It's fruit that has been flattened. So it hasn't really, the north side and south side still don't meet. They hasn't really become all mixed up. It's just become flat. That's all. So because of that, it still retains its eight status. It's very similar to what? To taking dried apricots and mushing them together till you make a roll. They still retain their eight status. So again, by fruit rolls, fruit leathers, it all depends on how it's made. So an expensive one that's made from actual flattened fruit would be an eights, while those that are sold in the regular stores that are like fruit roll up, they would definitely be shahakal. Okay. Now we have a little exception to this rule of ground products, which makes things very difficult in terms of practical halacha, and that is derech achilasa. If a certain food was grinded, so it lost its state, so it ideally should be demoted to shahakal. If this is the common and normal way of eating the fruit or vegetable, it retains its ha'etz or hadama status. That's a rule. Now that's a theoretical rule. How do we bring it down in practice? How is it expressed? In other words, because today we can argue everything that's sold in a ground state technically is common to eat it that way. I'll give an example. What bracha do we make on chickpeas? Hadam. Is it common to turn chickpeas into this mush called hummus? Certainly. Yeah. So maybe we should say hadam on hummus. Sesame seeds are hadam. Is it common to make tchina? So maybe we should say hadam on tchina. Is it common to make peanut butter? So maybe we should say hadam on peanut butter. It goes on and on. This rule of derech achilasam is confusing because things that we know are shahakal should become hadama due to it. So the answer is as follows. We only say it retains its hadama state if it's eaten the same way as it's eaten when it's not ground. So for example, when a person eats chickpeas, they can eat plain chickpeas. Does a person eat plain hummus?
Yes.
My 1.5-year-old does, but not most people. Most people don't take spoons of hummus and eat.
Right.
You eat it with bread. You eat it with crackers. So therefore, it has been demoted. So it's shahakal. Same thing with trina, same thing with peanut butter, etc. Because of this, all of these ground products, even though it's common, do not follow the derech achilas rule, and therefore will all be demoted to shahakal. Who can give me some examples where it is eaten in the same way, and therefore should retain its adama status? Well, first of all, we have mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes, you don't eat it with bread. And also by mashed potatoes, we have another advantage by them because in essence, it's not really ground, it's just flattened. So mashed potatoes would be a classical example of a fruit leather case where we retain its hadama. But if you buy instant mashed potatoes, that is shahakal. Another example would be chatzilim. Chatzilim that's ground is hadama. It's not shahakal, as the pieces are still recognizable. If, however, it's ground to the state that nothing is recognizable at all, like if you put it in a machine, a food processor, then it becomes shahakal. So it all depends on how it is made. Applesauce. What bracha do you say in applesauce? It's definitely common to make applesauce, and it's definitely common to eat it plain. You don't have to eat it with turkey or with, what else do they eat it with? Pancakes, latkes, right? You don't have to eat it with that. You can eat it plain. So because of this, many poskim rule that applesauce is a eitz, as it's a common way of eating it. I understand it's ground, but let's go back. We said we have an exception to the rule of ground, and that is derech achilas, and people eat it plain. But others say that no, it still retains its shahakal state. This is a debate amongst Rabbanim. Some will say shahakal, some will say ha'etz. In my opinion, I don't see why it should not be ha'etz. It follows all the rules, and therefore should be ha'etz. But if you're in doubt, you don't know what to do, just take another ha'etz product and another shahakal product and eat both of them and include it. Mashed bananas, again, this is a flattened fruit. It would still retain its adama state. Mashed avocado, this is just a flattened fruit. It would still retain its ha'etz state. Potato chips, no reason why they shouldn't be adama. However, Pringles are shahakal. Why? Because they're ground. They're smashed up. Popcorn is hadama, as even though the corn has went through a change similar to, you say, the grinding of the corn, it's not ground, but it's a different state of how it's being eaten. Nonetheless, it is made for this purpose, and therefore it still retains its hadama state. So popcorn is hadama. Rice. We'll conclude with this for today. Surely you get hungry after this class, huh?
Yeah.
But you don't know what to eat.
Which blessing so over rice? So rice has an interesting debate amongst the poskim. Everyone agrees that if we knew the identity of rice, it would be mezainis. Rice is ideal in mezainis. Why? Because rice gives a special satiation to the person similar to bread. That's why we know there are some countries in which all their bread is from rice. India, much of their bread is made from rice. Rice bread. That's their bread. That's what they eat. So, because of this, we rule that rice is mezainis. However, this is the theoretical rice. There's a question in poskim as to what is rice today. And some poskim say there is no question. The rice back then is the same rice today, and therefore you say mezainis on rice. So is followed by Sfardim and some Ashkenazim, but others hold no, it's a doubt, and therefore we don't know what bracha to say over rice. Because of this, the Alter Rebbe concludes either to eat it within a meal of hamaitzi, or another option is you say 3 brachas on 3 different products. Maybe it's mezainis, maybe it's real rice, so we say mezainis something else. Maybe it's not real rice, so we say hadama. Maybe it should be shahakal, because by certain cooked products they can become shahakal. So bottom line is that we say all three blessings in order to cover all the possibilities. And if somebody doesn't have all three blessings available, and they can technically just say shahakal over it, as a general rule is, whenever in a case of doubt, shahakal covers everything. Okay, Mitzvah next week we'll continue with soups, and we'll do some Tu B'Shvat halachas.
Thank you. Sarah,
Okay.